Welcome back to The Critical Thought. I'm JT.
And I'm Lady C. And today we're tackling a powerful topic: how the Watchtower uses fear-based conditioning to control Jehovah's Witnesses, and how it mirrors one of the most famous psychology experiments ever conducted, the Little Albert experiment.
You're listening to The Critical Thought, where we challenge our listeners to use critical thinking when examining the teachings of Jehovah's Witnesses.
Now, before we break it all down, let's start with the story behind Little Albert's experiment. You know, that study proved fear can be taught. And as you hear this, think about how familiar these tactics feel when it comes to the Watchtower.
The Little Albert experiment, conducted in 1920 by John B. Watson and Rosalie Rayner at Johns Hopkins University, was a pivotal study in psychology that demonstrated how fears could be conditioned in humans. Watson, the father of behaviorism, sought to prove that emotions like fear were not innate, but learned through association, building on Ivan Pavlov's work with classical conditioning. In the experiment, a 9-month-old infant known as Albert initially showed no fear of a white rat. However, Watson paired the rat with a loud, startling noise, which naturally frightened Albert. After repeated pairings, Albert began to fear the rat even without the noise. This process, known as classical conditioning, showed that neutral objects could become triggers for fear through association. The study also revealed generalization. Albert's fear extended to similar objects like a rabbit, a fur coat, and a Santa Claus mask. While groundbreaking, the experiment faced ethical criticism. Albert's fear was never reversed, and it's believed he may have suffered lasting emotional effects. Modern research ethics, emphasizing informed consent and participant welfare, would not permit such an experiment today. Despite its flaws, the Little Albert study laid the foundation for behaviorism and remains a key example of how fears are learned, a principle that continues to inform therapies for phobias and trauma.
Now, you know what's wild? And that is, this experiment today would be completely unethical to perform. You would lose your medical license. No researcher would be allowed to traumatize a child like this without consent, and especially not even having a plan to reverse the damage. But you know, that's exactly what the Watchtower does, without your consent or my consent and any plan to undo the harm. You see, they don't just teach doctrines, they program you through fear. Fear of Armageddon, fear of being shunned, fear of being removed from the congregation, fear of losing your family. And just like little Albert, that fear sticks even long after you leave this organization. And that's where it gets even deeper. And this is why so many former Jehovah's Witnesses, ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, they feel triggered many times when things begin to happen around the world. When events pop off like 9/11, wars, famine, pandemic, certain political upheavals, it brings back all the old fears that the Watchtower conditioned into them. And suddenly, a person begins to think to himself, maybe I need to go back to the Kingdom Hall. You know, I might need to go back and see what's going on. You see, because the Watchtower doesn't just teach fear, they make you believe that they are the only safe place from it. It is a classical psychological trap. Condition the fear, then offer yourself as the only escape. And that's why people struggle, because they've been so thoroughly conditioned over the years to believe that there is something, yes, something redeeming about returning. Even if they no longer believe this is the truth, it's that fear that just pulls them right back in.
And you know, the study also revealed generalization, because Albert's fear extended beyond that white rat to similar objects like a rabbit, a fur coat, and even a Santa Claus mask. His fear wasn't about the object itself, but about what it represented.
And that right there, that is so key. Albert didn't just fear the rat. He feared anything that reminded him of it. And that's exactly how the Watchtower works. They don't stop at one rule. They generalize your fear to everything outside their control. Birthdays, dangerous. Higher education is a trap. Non-Jehovah's Witness friends, spiritually corrupt. It's not logic, it's association. They train you to flinch at anything labeled worldly. And that's why even after you leave, the fear sticks. It's automatic. It's programming. Because the Watchtower didn't just control your beliefs, they control your emotions. Just like little Albert, they didn't teach you what to fear. They taught you to fear everything but them. And you don't have to take my word for it. Just listen to the voices of those who have actually lived it. Because what the Watchtower teaches doesn't stay in the Kingdom Hall. It follows you everywhere. It shapes your identity, your choices, your relationships, even your fears. So let's hear from real people, former Jehovah's Witnesses, who experienced this programming firsthand. Each one is living proof that what we're exposing here isn't theory, it's reality. And their stories show just how deep the conditioning runs.
Now let's talk about indoctrination. The Watchtower doesn't just shape your beliefs, it programs your entire identity from birth. Here's proof from someone who was born into it, where the conditioning ran through their whole family.
I was born and raised as a Jehovah's Witness. I'm a third generation. And so when you're born in, you're programmed and conditioned from birth, and you don't know any better. It's completely inundated everywhere around you. My family members on both sides, even depth, with aunts and uncles and everyone else, cousins and nephews, are Jehovah's Witnesses. So your role models are also obviously Jehovah's Witnesses. Your grandfather was an elder, pioneer, so you try to reach out for those things. So I was 100% in.
And that's what they do. They make sure the organization becomes your entire world. So when you leave, it feels like there's nothing outside. That's not faith, that's control.
Next, let's talk about isolation. They don't just remove you from the group, they rip your entire life out from under you. You lose family, friends, everything. And here's the proof.
When I got disfellowshipped, and there's a whole story behind that, and we can get into it later on, but regardless of that, when I got disfellowshipped, I was still living at home. I was an adult. I was 19, 20. But my mother asked me to leave. And at that point, I was working for some other Jehovah's Witnesses, cleaning restaurants. Didn't have a good job because I didn't go to college. Everybody else that was in my peer group that I went to school with, they were off at school, going for college. I'm still cleaning up floors and washing windows at 19, 20 years old with no background, no education, and no future for a job. And now all of a sudden I get disfellowshipped and I'm already working for Witnesses. So now I have nothing. And then my mother asked me to leave the house. And that would really surprise me because I knew what the policy was. And I thought, okay, this is going to be hell living in here, being disfellowshipped. But, I guess I'll be going to the meetings or whatever. And we ain't going to be sitting. I'm going to be sitting in the back and she's going to be sitting in the front. And that's just the way this is going to be. I hate this, but, I had no idea. My mother came home and said, you got to leave. You got to leave the house.
And that's the point. They make sure you're so dependent on them that when they throw you out, you're left with nothing. It's solitary confinement outside of prison walls.
Now, let's talk about shunning. They say it's out of love, but it's actually a weapon. It's how they cut you off from your own blood. As a child, one of my aunts was disfellowshipped when I was only 6 years old, and I was told she was cut out of the family, basically. I couldn't talk to her. I wasn't allowed to. And so the only times I saw her in my whole life were at my grandfather's funeral and at my grandmother's funeral. I finally did reconnect with her. It was not easy. I didn't have any way to contact her. I had heard that she had a restaurant in a little town, and fortunately that restaurant had her name in the title. And so via Google Maps, my brother and I were able to find her restaurant, and I had to write a letter to her restaurant, and I said, I've left. I don't believe this is right, the way the family has treated you. I'm not an active Jehovah's Witness anymore, and I'd like to get in touch with you. And she was absolutely wonderful.
Family weaponized. Shunning isn't about love, it's about obedience. And they don't care who it destroys either.
Now, let's talk about Armageddon anxiety. The Watchtower makes you so afraid of dying outside of their walls that you never even plan for life.
My father just died about 6 months ago, and he had a horrible deathbed experience. And so, for such a devout elder, for 60 years, to have a crisis of faith on his deathbed, it was really, really hard to take. And it's never discussed. Your deathbed experience is never discussed in the hall. You never go and say, oh, we planned our funeral for such and such. You don't discuss things like that. You don't discuss 20 years down the road because, well, Armageddon's coming. So you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about your deathbed because, well, Armageddon's coming soon, around the corner. You never, ever put any thought into your deathbed experience. And every one of them are going to have one.
And that's the tragedy. They tell you, don't worry about the future. Armageddon's coming. So when life does happen, when death does come, you're completely unprepared.
Let's talk about fear. The governing body loves fear. Fear of the world, fear of outsiders, and they admit it out loud.
We have this wicked world all around us that is trying to assimilate us into joining them in ungodly conduct. And looking at the ratio, we as Jehovah's people are outnumbered by people of the world by about 900 to 1.
There it is, straight from their own mouths, fear-mongering. The world is not wicked, but they have to make you believe it is. Otherwise, you leave the organization.
But the worst part, emotional isolation. This fellowshipping is designed to break you because humans need connection. Listen to this.
The most painful thing I think you can do to another human being is to isolate them and cut them off. That's why solitary confinement, is such an issue in the prisons and stuff, and why it's such an effective tool also in those environments, because that people will do almost anything to just not be alone. And when you're raised as Jehovah's Witness your whole life, when all of your family around you, all your friends are in that environment, when they cut you off and disfellowship you, you are put into solitary confinement.
Exactly. They use psychological warfare. They don't care about your spirituality. They care about your obedience. And isolation, that's their favorite weapon.
Now let's talk about conditional love. In the Watchtower, love isn't real, it's transactional. You're only worthy if you believe exactly what they say.
You come to the realization that the brotherhood that you thought you had as a Jehovah's Witness is conditional and relative. And I think that's an eye-opener for people to recognize how quickly you can just turn that off because you no longer believe what I believe, or you no longer think the way I think. And then to be able to get the exposure to other people who are not like that, that's also very, very eye-opening. I will say that in the time that I've left Watchtower, I've made friendships, and I mean real friendships and connections with people who have been there for me in ways I can't even go into right now. in some really, really difficult times since leaving Watchtower, but who have been there unconditionally, unquestioningly, and it's not about what I think or what I do for them or what have you, but they've just been there, and more so than I ever encountered in all the years I was a Jehovah's Witness.
And that is what the Watchtower hides from you. You see, real love doesn't come with terms and conditions. That's control, not community.
Finally, salvation anxiety. The fear they drill into you that leaving the Watchtower means losing everything, even your chance at life itself.
What really affected my mental health stepping away was thinking about, is it really, if I step away, am I giving up not only some family, but am I giving up not being in the new system? Or if I die, am I giving up not being resurrected?
And that's the ultimate hook, the fear of eternity. They make you believe that leaving them means you're leaving God. But the truth is, they're not God. And leaving them doesn't mean losing your life. It means getting it back. And that, right there, is the whole game. The Watchtower doesn't want your belief. They want your mind. And they keep it through a constant diet of their rhetoric. That's why they push meetings, magazines, and the Jehovah's Witness broadcasting, because the conditioning only works if it's non-stop. They have to keep you on that treadmill of fear. Because the moment you step off, the moment you pause, you start to think. And thinking is their greatest threat. They've trained you to believe that without them, you're lost. That the world is dangerous and God has abandoned you. But here's the truth. The danger was never the world. The danger was never outside. The danger was believing that you couldn't survive without them. But here's what they won't tell you. You're stronger than their programming. You are not alone. And you can decondition from the fear they've planted in you. Because the most powerful step you'll ever take is the one out of their control.
So if this video has made you think, if it's hit home, good. Because understanding where you've been is the first step to knowing where you're going. And your journey doesn't end here. In upcoming episodes, we're bringing you more than just exposure. We're bringing solutions, resources, tools, and real strategies to help you unlearn the fear and reclaim your life. Because this isn't just about breaking free. It's about staying free.
This has been JT with my co-host Lady C, right here on The Critical Thought. Now it's your turn. Drop a comment below. What fears did they plant in you? And how are you